Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you, and I'm very excited to introduce our speaker for the James Wood Speaker Series. As you know, we've been very fortunate to have such a lineup of top C-level executives here at Clayton State, and this is a wonderful opportunity to engage and find out what business leaders are doing in the United States, and to hopefully gain some insight for when you are leaders in the future. And so it's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Julie Stansbury, who is the Chief Information Officer, CIO, for GE's Capital's Retail Finance, Business and Restructuring Operations. Wow, that's a title and a half. The retail finance business provides consumer financing such as private label credit, card programs, bank cards, installment lending through retail partners, dealers, association contracts, manufacturers, healthcare practices, and service providers across more than 20 industries. Restructuring Operations is a diverse group of solid but non-strategic businesses of GE Capital's portfolio, focusing on improving returns, increasing productivity, and optimizing their value. She is responsible for driving the technology strategy of the business, providing a leadership role in the day-to-day operations for all information technology functions. GE, as you know, is a diversified global infrastructure, finance, and media company. From energy, water, transportation, and health to access to money and information, GE serves customers in more than 100 countries and employs more than 300,000 employees. Julie joined GE in 1983 as a project leader, systems analyst, and programmer in GE Aircraft Engines Information Technology. I'm sure you're going to hear a little bit more about all these different divisions. She then went to GE Appliances in 1993, where she was the managing IT for purchasing, quality, manufacturing, and marketing. And then she joined GE Power Systems, helping lead the energy service providers' e-business initiatives and steer the development of new business processes and infrastructure. Julie rejoined GE Appliances in 2000 as IT manager for sales and briefly as CIO of GE Lighting before her current role in 2002. She's a Six Sigma black belt, and she's graduated from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, where I just found out her daughter is also. No, she's at Ohio University in Athens. And she earned her bachelor's degree in systems analyst and now lives in Connecticut. Please join me in giving a warm welcome from Clayton State University to Julie.
Well, thank you for the nice intro. I got to tell you, that kind of wore me out. Sounds like a lot of work there. But, you know, thank you all for inviting me to be here with you today. I'm actually was really looking forward to it. I love Atlanta. So in the series of jobs she talked about, I did live here in Atlanta for about 1.5 years and loved it. So I was telling Lee this morning if I could get back and get used to the traffic again, I'd love to get back here. But, you know, glad to be here with you today. What I was really kind of planning to do was tell you just a little bit about myself, a little bit about, you know, series of the jobs I had at GE, and which we've kind of highlighted, so I'll go in a little bit more detail. But, you know, a little more about just the things I learned along the way. You know, what were some of the lessons I learned, what were some of the experiences I had that kind of helped shape the who I am or who I became. Because I got to tell you, when I started back in '83, I can't believe you said that out loud. You know, I never could have quite imagined, you know, the path that, you know, my career has taken or where I am today. So hope to just share some of that with you, and then would just love to open it up to you in terms of questions and answers. And you know, I tend to like the engagement and dialogue, so you know, I'll talk for a bit, and then we'll just get some open discussion going. So with that, and I didn't do a pitch, so although I'm the CIO, I'm skipping the technology, and I've just got handwritten notes, believe it or not. But, you know, just a little bit about me as a background. So born in Cincinnati, Ohio, come from a pretty big family, so there were 6 kids in my family, 4 brothers and a sister. As you said, I went to Miami University, and I have to explain that's Oxford, Ohio, as opposed to people tend to think the one down in Florida. But if you're from Ohio, you actually know what Miami is. And, you know, my degree was systems analysis, so you don't tend to hear that as a degree program. Today you hear about, you know, computer engineering, computer science, or maybe MIS. And I would say the best way to describe it is really kind of a cross between the computer engineering and the MIS. So not quite as technical, but not as what I consider kind of light on the MIS side. And Miami's a big business school, so with that, I had a lot of business classes, which gave me a nice kind of rounding out. I have one daughter, as we talked about, so she's a sophomore at Ohio University, so that certainly has been a fun challenge to manage the career while also being a mom, and how do you kind of make all of that happen while you're doing job moves. And then just, in terms of me, I love to read. It's the way I relax after a long day at work. I enjoy cooking, and I would say on the weekends when I have time to do it. And even just, in terms of fun, I love vacations. And for me, the best kind of vacation is a beach, anywhere. I need a little bit of shade. I need a book, actually a Kindle, I should say. I use Kindle. Drink in my hand, and that for me is a great way to get started. So as we talked about, I was recruited by GE right out of college. And, back then, and like I said, it was a long time ago, but 1983. And, what's interesting, and just, I guess, share just a little bit, and this is a conversation I have with my daughter, how unusual was it that I picked a degree program. It turns out I liked it in school, and then I got recruited in that. And here, this was 1983, and here I am almost 27 years later, same company, doing the same thing. Almost unheard of, and it's probably a career path that probably none of you will have, because people don't stay with companies as long, there's lots of change, and really so many folks pick a degree program or start in one career and switch. So I'm pretty abnormal, right, Lee? No, I'm just kidding, but mine is probably not necessarily the normal track, but having worked for a company like GE, I think it's really kind of helped me, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. So as I got started, again, aircraft engines in Cincinnati, and I don't know about you guys, but what I knew about GE before I started working there was appliances and light bulbs, right? And I really had no idea about the breadth of the company. But started there, so this was really early days in terms of getting started with my career, and I was a COBOL programmer, learning about the business, systems analyst, got into just some kind of initial early roles. But what I would share with you about that was, my first years, and I really spent 10 years there, but it was really all about building credibility and getting just deep expertise, and in my case, it's information technology. But as you get started, once you wrap up your education and you're in the world, trying to build your career, that early years of just really building a lot of credibility, getting to be an expert so that people know that you really know what you're doing is a really great way to shape the early part of your career. To give you just a story in terms of how some of that happened. Aircraft engines, again, it's an industrial business. We design and manufacture aircraft engines, and so we actually had one time where the hourly workforce went on strike. And what was so interesting about it was, while they went on strike, the rest of us went and we worked on the shop floor. So interestingly enough, here I was a programmer of systems that helped run the shop floor. And now during the strike, there I was actually using my own systems and actually learning a little bit more about why we were coding things the way that we were. But what happened after 6 or 8 weeks of a strike, we then went back to our regular jobs. And as it turned out, I suddenly had a new position, so they gave me a new set of responsibilities. So I now was responsible for a big project that I really had just inherited. And what I quickly came to find out was the project was in big trouble. So it was very late. Not only was it delayed, the 6 or 8 weeks because we'd been out on the strike, but it was quite a bit beyond even what its due date was. So the challenge for me was, what do you do about it? And here I have new job, new team, and frankly, a new boss that I don't know all that well. So imagine walking into the new boss and saying, hey, I've had this thing for a couple weeks now, but it's in trouble, right? We need to delay this thing. The project isn't on track. And his reaction, as you might imagine, wasn't great initially. Matter of fact, his face got red. If I recall, he hollered at me, sent me out of the room, and but I came back and basically said, here's what I need to tell you about the project, but more importantly, here's what we're going to do to get this thing back on track, right? And again, whether it's I need to add resources, I'm going to structure how we approach this differently. What happened out of this, what was, as it turned out, a pretty tough incident was I built some really great credibility with my leadership team by not only tackling what was a tough challenge, but then finding a way to get this thing back on track and ultimately deliver. So while it was very painful along the way, I came out of that with a lot of good credibility. Another story I would just kind of share with you, and this again was while I was still at Aircraft Engines. This is what I kind of call my 3 strikes and you're out story. But just to kind of set the stage for this, I was home on maternity leave. So I'd had my daughter, I'm home on maternity leave, and as you can imagine, my mind was really not thinking too much about work, right? I was busy with a new baby and pretty sleepless, actually. So my phone rings one day, and I answer the phone, and the man on the phone says, "Hi, this is Hal." And I'm thinking, Hal? Hal, who is that? And he goes to say, "Your boss." And I went, "Oh, that's right." And I'm so not thinking about work, I'm like, "Oh, my boss, okay. Hi." And then he goes on to tell me that while I was out on maternity leave, they've actually just given me a new job. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. I didn't recognize who you were on the phone because I'm so sleepless. And now you guys want to give me another job at work. But what happened was, so I came back, right? So after finished up my maternity leave, I come back to the new job. And while I'm getting started, I'm getting to learn what this project is, understanding new things about the business because it was a new role. I had people kept walking by my cubicle, asking me how things were going, how was the project. And I'm thinking, what's going on? Because I got a lot of people kind of coming to see what's happening. So I started asking a lot of questions. And like, "Oh, you didn't know? The person who was doing this job before, they didn't get it done, they fired him." I'm thinking, oh, great. Really? I started asking some more questions. "Well, yeah, we've tried to do this thing twice. It's failed each time." And I'm thinking, oh, wonderful. So not only was this really not a job that I necessarily asked for, nor was I expecting, turns out it was going to be a pretty tough one. So it was a big project that the company had tried to implement twice and it hadn't worked. So hence 3 strikes and you're out, right? So as I sat there going, well, heck, I don't want to lose my job. You know, the question is, what do I do differently? How do I approach this project and this challenge differently than my 2 predecessors that turns out that they didn't make it? Luckily enough, turns out I was able to do that. But you know, what I really learned from that was, you know, how do you be successful when there's a big challenge and others in front of you haven't been? And how do you not get too scared, frankly, that you don't panic? And how do you just kind of step back and look at it and go, what do I need to do in order to be successful? And in this case, for one fact, it was building a very strong partnership with the business team. So this was, at this time I was working for engine assembly. So imagine you've got all the parts and all the sub-assemblies for an engine, but you're assembling it, right? And so we applied technology to how the assembly of the engines happened and really how all the record keeping about the engines happened. So that was really the project I was doing, was implementing this technology. So as you can imagine, you can't do this without the business team, right? The leaders of the engine assembly function, first of all, have to want this. This can't be IT pushing the technology. And they've got to be as focused and engaged and, frankly, applying resources to it as I would be from the IT perspective. So part of what we did was, before we really got started, was really ensuring that we had the right engagement and partnership with the business team. And then the other thing I would say is, what I really learned was how to sell. And honestly, I'm not a salesperson whatsoever, totally not my nature in terms of what to do. But this was one where I learned about kind of selling a vision. You know, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? It was a pitch that it wasn't something that I did once. I probably did it 3 times a week, you know, for many weeks on end, because it was a very big operation. It was a big function. There was a lot of people that had to understand the direction and where we were going and why, and what was their role in it, and how did they help. So it was certainly a very interesting learning experience for me. So while I had been very focused on technology up to that point, as it turns out, what I needed to be successful in this case really had nothing to do with technology. It was relationships and partnerships with the business team. And it was really kind of selling that strategy and that vision of ultimately what were we all collectively trying to do to be successful. So, you know, a couple, you know, early career but big learnings that frankly taught me a lot, but also taught the business a lot about me in terms of my ability to get things done despite pretty tough situations. Sorry, thirsty here. And then, you know, after aircraft engines, so I spent 10 years there, and it was really, like I said, you know, building the basics of my career and early kind of leadership experiences and opportunities. And then after that, I went to GE Appliances, which is in Louisville, Kentucky. So not only was I switching businesses, but I was moving. It's not a huge big deal, but yeah, I was from Cincinnati. I'd been in Cincinnati, so it was somewhat big that I'm changing the where I live and the where I work. And having come from a business where after 10 years, I was pretty established. You know, I knew the systems, I knew the business, I understood the details a lot, and frankly, if I didn't, I knew who to ask. And suddenly here I am at GE Appliances in Louisville, new business, new people, new boss, new processes, different systems, and I went, huh, how do I start all over again? And while I was really excited about the challenge, and one of the things I've always enjoyed about my experience with GE is that opportunity to learn, it was interesting to go from, I was kind of the expert, to I was the new kid on the block. and frankly had a lot to learn. So for me, one of the big lessons here was, and I kind of say survival skill, but it was, how to learn how to lead and operate when in fact you don't know all of the experiences. And one of my really quick survival skills was, I found the guy being gender neutral, by the way, but in this case it happened to be a guy, but who'd been in the business a long time. He was well connected, he knew the details, he'd been around for a while, and I got to know him so that when I needed help, or I needed to align with a resource, I needed to get some assistance, I wouldn't know who to ask, but I could go to him and he could tell me who the right people were, right? So that how do you adapt and how do you learn how to operate within a new environment was certainly one that I learned there. And then I'd also say I had what I call my kind of project from hell story, and you guys probably have these already even as students, but have you ever had that project where despite everything you try to do to get it done, you just can't? And I had one of those. So again, here I am, new job, new situation, and it was a project that was already underway. So it wasn't something where I had the ability to shape it from the beginning. I inherited the project, the schedule, the budget, frankly, the technology decisions that had already been made, and the vendor that we were partnering with. But boy, was it a mess. So it was over budget, it was missing schedule, the technology wasn't working, and again, the what do you do? Now, from my prior stories, you can tell I tend to not want to stop, right? I find, obstacles are in my way. Part of what that building credibility was how do I be successful despite challenges and problems? Well, my learning on this one was exactly the opposite. It was, what? Sometimes it's the right thing to do is to pull the plug and stop something. And that was a really tough thing to do. It doesn't sound like it, but when you're in a business environment and you've got commitments to deliver something and the business is waiting on you, money's being spent, the hard choice that says, what? This maybe was the wrong thing in the first place, or throwing more money, bad after good, good after bad, which way the phrase goes. That decision to say it's time to stop and we really shouldn't be doing this was interesting. So tough one to make personally. And then what I ultimately found was when I finally kind of in my own mind got settled with that was the right thing to do, I then had to convince everybody else around me, my boss, the business leaders, the people that were expecting, that this really was the right thing to do. So interesting experience, but tough one. But sometimes, well, not sometimes. I think we all learn from the tougher things in life than really from the easy ones, right? So after 5 years there, this is when I came to Atlanta. So I worked for our power systems business here in Atlanta. So it's a very large business. Essentially, we make big turbines for the energy and the utility industry. And what was interesting here was, in this situation, what I learned about was how hard it really can be to drive change. And in this case, what I had was, they were setting up a new operation within the business. And my job was really not just defining the technology and the infrastructure that we needed, but it was also defining the business processes. So at a very high level, the business had a new strategy that was very different than the way they had operated traditionally. And a couple levels above me, they set the strategy, but I was kind of the person to, my job was to make this happen. And what was interesting was, in the culture, what you had was a lot of folks that had been in the business a long time. And so when they heard upper management talking about this new vision and strategy, they'd sit in the room and kind of nod, right? But then outside the room, they're like, this isn't happening. This is the way I do my job. I've done it this way for 15, 20 years. No way am I going to do it this way. And here I am as the new person, trying to be the one to drive the change. And so it was very interesting. And I would say, as a leader, driving change, it's hard. I knew it was going to be hard coming in. I had no idea really how tough it was. And one analogy that I will use, and at some training class I learned this one a while ago, but it just really stuck and it fit in this situation. And they talked about, think about change and think about a rubber band, right? So when you kind of pull on either end and you stress it, and if at the top is your vision of new, whatever this is, the new way you're going to operate, it's the new culture, at the other end of it that's current state. And if you don't keep pulling on it, right, towards that new vision, let it go, everything's going to go back to whatever current state was. And that was really what I was fighting here, right? There was top leadership was defining new strategy, but everybody else was in this, nope, not interested in doing it. And so, how do you really drive change? Now, one of the things I tried to do was, again, you've got to communicate, you've got to sell the vision, there's key people in the organization, but what I also learned is there's oftentimes these unofficial, I would say, holders of power that aren't necessarily managers or leaders in the organization, but sometimes they're the people that have been there a long time. They're kind of the backbone of the org, whether they are on the org chart or not. They're the influencers, that if you can get them on board, you can maybe get the rest of the organization with you. But if you don't, they're the ones, like I said, nod their heads in the meeting, and back in the, back at their office or in their cube, they're doing the same old thing. And really understanding the dynamics of an organization and who those, like I said, unofficial power holders were, as opposed to the official ones, was what would make or break whether or not ultimately we could get this change driven in. So very interesting learning, and like I said, what it takes to drive change in an organization. Really hard. It takes a lot longer than we would ever tend to imagine. So after that learning, I then went back to appliances for a little bit, and I'll fast forward a little here because we'll get to the Q&A. It's more fun. But I then had an opportunity to be the Chief Information Officer at GE Lighting. So from a career perspective, all of this was working towards me really getting what I would say my first really big leadership opportunity. So I'd had big leadership roles, but I'd never run the whole IT function. So here I am, I'm leaving appliances, I'm going to GE Lighting in Cleveland, and I'm excited. This is my first big leadership role that I, been working hard for, so I'm feeling good. And as it turns out, I'd been in the job 3, maybe 4 months when GE, and we're famous for restructuring and reorganizing, they announced a big restructuring of all the businesses. Now bear in mind, I just came from appliances. I'm at Lighting. What did they do? Combine the two businesses. I went, you've got to be kidding me. I just got here. Matter of fact, I just moved in my house. I didn't even have all the boxes unpacked yet. And my daughter, who's, gamely going along with me as we're doing some of these moves, just starts a new school in Cleveland. She's 7th grade. You guys remember the 7th grade, right? That's a tough time to move, right? She's had an awful first day at school. I see her coming home from the bus and she's trudging. Got lost, couldn't open her locker, all of the traditional really horrible first day. And my daughter's, she's generally a really, flexible, give it whatever you got kind of kid. And boy, it was tough. And on the same day that she has this rough first day, I find out we're combining these businesses. And by the way, my boss, who was the guy at appliances, and he was, higher than me on the org chart, he's going to run these 2 combined businesses. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. And like I said, just moved, daughter in new school, haven't even unpacked all the boxes. And then what do, right? Now, and it was tough. I won't kid you. It was, but the lesson out of all of this is, what do you then do? How do you approach things when a big change gets put upon you? And again, whether it's personal, professional, right? Because curveballs come at us in life, right? We've all had them, unexpected things, you don't necessarily know what's coming, but it's what you bring to the situation, how you approach it, right? Really helps determine how you come through it on the other side. And so I learned about being flexible, and I learned the fact that, as much as you try to plan things in life, they just, a lot of times don't happen the way you expect them. And like I said, we've all had situations in our lives where that happens, but, in this case, it was a mix of both the personal and professional, and, it was tough. But ultimately what came out of that was, I helped integrate the 2 businesses for a little bit, but then a new opportunity, which is the current role that I'm in. And I got to tell you, 1,000,000 times better than that job I would have had at GE Lighting. And so while it was really tough, and the fact that I moved then again, and as it turns out, this was in a calendar year. I started in Louisville, Kentucky. I went to Cleveland, and I wrapped up the year in Connecticut. Imagine my taxes that year, right? I had 3 state taxes to file. Here we are on tax day. But as it turned out, wouldn't have guessed it, but, a much better opportunity, came out of what was a really tough situation for me. And so while the job was great, what I really then had to weigh was, wow, do I want to pack up and move my daughter again? Because we had just moved, right? And so for me, then it was how do I gauge making a decision here? And, I guess I'll just to share with you, because so this is 7th grade. That's a tough time sometimes to move kids. And the decision that I made was, well, actually, let me back up a minute. My daughter's great. She really is. I got to give her a ton of credit. So ultimately, in the end, when I did eventually share with her that my job was going away, wasn't fired, but didn't have a job, her attitude was amazing. She said, Mom, are we going to have to move again? Of course, I didn't want to say, yeah, but well, we might have to, honey. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen here. And in the end, what she said, which was awesome, was, Mom, I haven't been here long enough really to make friends anyway, So if you've got to move, let's do it sooner rather than later. And I went, oh, come here, let me hug you up. Because frankly, for me, that gave me kind of the okay, that if I wanted to pursue this from the professional side, that, you know what, we could make the personal side of it happen. So I got to tell you, that eased it up a little bit. But at the same time, I was worried about, you know, moving her again and at that time zone, not time zone, but at that age in her life. And so really, in order for me to be okay with it, the promise I made myself was, if she wasn't okay, you know, after we moved, if the transition didn't work, she wasn't settling well, I'd leave, right? Nothing was going to be more important than knowing that my daughter was settled in life, and if I needed to leave GE in order to make that happen, I would. Turns out she landed well, thank goodness. Now, we were then heading into those teen years, which, you know, were a little bit crazy, but that was the normal kind of crazy. But again, you know, I really learned about, you know, how, you know, life throws things at you, and the, you know, how you handle them, the attitude you bring to them, and frankly, the what you learn from them, right? And in this case, as it turned out, there was another great opportunity that I wouldn't have had otherwise if this other challenge really hadn't happened. And then that brings me to, you know, my current role. So I started in late 2002. So that's what, 7 years? 7 going on 7.5. And it has been a really interesting change. So if you think about prior to that, all my experience had been on the industrial, the manufacturing side of GE. So where we make products, very much engineering, manufacturing kind of set of businesses versus, you know, GE Capital, which is a financial services business. So very different. Now from an information technology side, very exciting because our systems really run the businesses. So one of the businesses I'm responsible for is called retail finance. So if you have a, let's see, a JCPenney card or a Lowe's card or Banana Republic or Gap, any number of these private label credit cards that are out there, so we run those credit programs on behalf of the retailers. Now from a technology perspective, what that means is when you're shopping and you swipe your credit card, that transaction goes from the retailer across my network, our network, right, Lee and Keith? But our network, right, comes across us in terms of our network. And so where you're looking to buy that sweater for whatever it is, $39.99, that transaction is coming across our network. We're looking up your information. We're giving a yes, no, okay to buy. Response back to the retailer, point of sale in less than 2 seconds, right? The statements that you get, the credit cards, everything that you get, all of that technology is really what we do, as well as that information of consumers. So in our business, we have 50 million active consumers, meaning that have our credit product, you know, carry it in your wallet today, active with our product, and then another 150, close to 200 million of inactive consumers. So if you think about the US population, we've got data warehouses that, and again, safely secured, just so you guys all want to know. We are very careful about information security, but you know, we have a ton of consumer information. And so information technology is a huge part of the overall business. You know, we don't launch a new product. If you think about it, products, it's a credit card, it's a new feature or functionality. That all happens through IT, as compared to on the industrial side of GE. Yeah, we ran the order systems or the logistics and things, but you know, if need be, they could kind of run without us. Here, they don't. And frankly, it's 7 by 24. So it's not just shopping at the store, right? But you're shopping online. You know, having systems that are very reliable, very available. You know, from an information technology perspective, I would say it's quite a dream job, but it's, you know, it's one where the technology is really key to the business strategy, and it certainly has been interesting. And then, you know, just lessons, and frankly, there's been a lot of them. You know, what I've learned, because it ended up being then a much larger leadership role than I'd ever have, or had prior to that. And I really learned about how to operate broadly, so where I had a big set of responsibilities, I had to operate across the breadth of it, but yet I had to know when I needed to go deep on a problem or something wasn't working well, and really understand how to do both. Because frankly, as my job got broader, I worked the breadth, and there were times where I missed things down below that I needed to know about. And again, whether there were problems, there were some issues, things that maybe weren't running the way they were. And the ability to kind of go broad, but yet know when you've got to go deep was something that I really had to learn how to do. And I would say, you know, it's just constant learning and growing. As a business, we've changed a ton in 7 years. We've launched new products, we've acquired businesses, we've started new products, and we've done all kinds of things to really grow the business. And then everybody, you all know the economic cycle we've been in for the past couple years. So as you can imagine, we've also then been retracting. We've sold businesses, we've shut things down, we've stopped products. You know, I've seen the kind of whole cycle, and the ability to constantly learn to always be growing and to be flexible, because it's a constantly changing environment is something that I absolutely had to learn how to do, and frankly it's part of what we in our business I think have to do a lot of. So it certainly has been very, very interesting. And then I would say, I talked earlier about leading change and how do you drive change when I was with my power systems business, but what we have been through in our business in the past couple years has been amazing. We, in fact, did have at one point in time a mortgage business as part of our portfolio. We've since exited that, and frankly exited it pretty quickly. So I think if you read the media, they'll talk about the subprime mortgage crisis starting what? 2008, maybe 2007 sometime, right? We actually started seeing issues in our business in 2006. So not really severe, but we knew we were having problems. We saw margins shrinking, right? So the price that we could originate the mortgages for, what we could sell them for, the margins were really shrinking. Initially, we tried to just do volume. That's what you heard a lot of, people just originating and frankly loosening their criteria, which is part of the problem in terms of who you're giving mortgages to. Now, we did a little bit, but not too much, but we could clearly see that we couldn't outgrow the problem. And so by early 2007, we had already made the decision that we needed to exit the business. And frankly, couldn't get out of it fast enough because we could tell there was something really going on in the market. We just didn't know what all it was. But by probably June of 2007, we were 85 probably percent about done with it. I mean, it took the rest of the year to fully shut it down. But as it turned out, and again, in the GE world, by the way, if you don't perform, you're in big trouble. So it wasn't an easy year for our business because we did lose money. But in hindsight, we looked pretty smart because relative to the rest of the mortgage industry, we'd actually exited and shut down long before it was really a big thing that everybody knew about. Now, what's interesting about that, and again, the learning from the tough situations, again, a business or personal, what we really learned from that was, because then, again, that same consumer who maybe had a mortgage with us also had some of our credit cards in their wallet, right? So if we could see this mortgage industry really starting to have trouble, what we assumed was going to happen was the overall consumer, U.S. consumer, is really going to be stressed. And while our private label credit card business was still looking pretty good, we knew it wasn't going to, right? And so we learned from that really tough mortgage situation and went, we've got to start working on how do we manage the risk differently in our credit card business. And so we started taking, and again, credit actions, and as consumers, we all hated it. We didn't originate as much credit. Oftentimes, we changed credit lines, right? So that's managing the risk in the portfolio. But from the business perspective, a smart thing to do. And we actually started taking actions on that, in 2008. So a lot earlier than our competitors in the business. And while the past 2 years have been a bumpy ride, would you guys say? It's been tough. The overall economy has been tough. We did lots of job reductions. Again, we were shrinking the business and really managing through the cycle. But as it turns out, we did well. 2009, which we would have thought was going to be a disastrous year. And as we ran, you always heard about the Fed and their stress tests, right? The stress cases. And we did the same thing. We ran those kind of models in our business. And if we'd had the worst case, boy, the losses would have been bad. But the good news was we had the learning from the mortgage business that we applied to our credit card business and took actions earlier than we would have otherwise. And again, it's not that we didn't have losses. We did. But nothing like we would have had otherwise. And still we're able to generate positive net income, which has set us up for this year already having some really good performance. So for us, while the overall cycle isn't over yet in terms of the tough economy, we're ahead of it and feeling pretty good about it. So while 2010 will still be a challenging year, it's going to be better than it might have been otherwise. And again, just another example of learning in a tough environment. So with that, let me just give a couple, kind of, I think, summary lessons that maybe I've talked about, but just to kind of emphasize those at the end, and then, we'll open up for any kind of questions or things you guys might want to talk about. So again, key things that I learned along the way. One is just, be open to new things, to change. Clearly I've got a number of examples in my background where, I had a new job I didn't pick. And frankly, if I'd had the opportunity, I might have said no thank you. But you never know when a chance to learn, a chance to grow, to do something new or different is going to come your way. And so just finding ways to really be open to change and to be open to new opportunities is likely going to bring you things in life that you never would have expected. I would say, make sure you're always learning. In the information technology field, I mean, it's huge, right? Technologies are constantly changing, and half of what I have to do is have my smart technology people help me keep up to speed. But the world is changing at such a fast pace these days that what you did 2 years ago that was great is probably not good enough today, right? And you have to make sure that you're always learning and growing. And I'd also add to that and say, make sure you're relevant. And by that I mean it's just whatever is going on in your industry, your business, whatever it is, make sure you're involved. If there's some new big change, a big thing in our business has been, the Fed changed a lot of the consumer regulation. We have been working for probably a year and a half on that. But you can either sit back and wait when change like that's happening to see what happens, or you can say, wait a minute, I know this is here, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to proactively figure out what this means for my team, right? I can be relevant in this business. That being relevant and always kind of, I won't say proving your worth, but reminding people that you provide a lot of value to the organization is really an important thing to do. The other thing I would say, and this leans a little more, on the personal side of things, but as you're moving ahead in your life, know what's important to you, whatever that is. And what's important to you personally and what's important to you professionally. And know that those things might be different at different points in your life, and that's actually okay. But when times come where, again, a challenge is thrown your way, or gee, here's a job, but it's in Connecticut, will you take it? If you really know what you're about as a person, what's important to you personally, what's important to you professionally, you've got that kind of as your guide, you can make good decisions, right? And I would also say, make the best decision you can at a point in time, and remember that it's not forever. I made the decision to go to Connecticut with the caveat of, if it didn't work, I'll do something different, right? That was the way that I could be okay with it. But really knowing what's important to you personally and professionally will help really guide you as you need to make, your decisions in life. I talked earlier about, just building a reputation of being able to get things done, that you can deliver, that you can execute. I can't imagine there's any field where that's not really, really important. And then I would say in terms of balance, a lot of times you'll hear about work-life balance. And what I tend to tell people is I think there's really no such thing as balance. Obviously I've got a daughter, so I was a working mom. I was a single mom, so I was, doing it on my own. And the reality is, balance I think isn't there. I always would joke that I was kind of the master juggler. And the question was, what were the important things in your life that you need to juggle? And again, the important ones, because there's a bunch of other ones that maybe aren't worth trying to keep up in the air. But kind of juggling and making sure you've got the focus on the most important ones, and know that there's times where the personal side of your life wins out. There's times where work takes more. But for me, the gauge always was that in the end, over the long haul, did I feel good about it? Did I feel that I was being the mom that I needed to be to my daughter? And while I want to, be happy and enjoy what I'm doing at work, the reality is that's never, for me, and this is my personal values, right? Never going to be more important than what I do at home. Yes?
Go ahead and finish your statement. I just had a question.
That's okay. But so, for me, that knowing, what's important to you has always kind of helped me really guide in terms of what I'm doing. But again, the balance, and, you guys are yet another generation different from me, right? Today we have working from home and remote workers, and, how do you manage that, working your life and your work life and what's important to you? And, just understand that you guys will all have to figure out what that means for you, because it's a very individual thing and it's different. And then the last thought I would just share with you is, just be aware that as you think about, finishing school and moving on into your professional careers, that it's a long haul. It's a long road. As I said, I've been with GE. It'll be 27 years this summer, and honestly, I can't believe it. I mean, it's been a long time. Could have never foreseen, the path that I took, but, on the whole, it's really been good. But at the same time, you do the math, started right out of college, even with 27 years, and I'm nowhere close to retirement, right? So, just be aware that it is a long road, and you really need to think long term. And again, whether it's about the decisions that you make, it's about the fact that, you maybe change directions, right? As I said, I'm probably pretty unusual in terms of one company and, one career track. And that many people do, make different decisions along the way, and that I don't think we're ever too old to, replan some things and do some things differently in your life. But if I can offer that perspective of time, because like I said, I can't believe how long I've been at GE, although it seems like it went by fast, but yet there's still a long road ahead of me. So it's a long road, and you want to be thinking long term about, what you're doing and the decisions that you make in life. Did you want to?
You just made a very good point about moving around. I heard an interesting statistic, or interesting saying a couple of days ago, that The reason why a lot of minorities and women don't progress in corporate America is because they're unwilling to move. And one of the things I've seen amongst a lot of our students here, we do have predominantly women and minority student population, is that when I speak with them about careers or opportunities, many of them are unwilling to move to other parts of even the Southeast.
Right.
It's what makes it a lot more challenging for them to
It
get
does.
the opportunities they want, but then to progress in those opportunities.
It does, and I would say if I hadn't moved, I wouldn't have had the path that I had today. You know, I was at Aircraft Engines, like I said, for 10 years. Part of why I ultimately did take another move to a GE business was, and again, it wasn't like I'd conquered the business, but I was looking for what's next. And it's a big company in and of itself as part of GE. And what we had at the time was, we had gone through what we called a de-leveling and de-layering, but you know, there were levels of management, and we were simplifying the organization structure. And so what the dynamic that really happened was, here I was getting ready for my first kind of management leadership roles, and what happened kind of above me was there was a whole bunch of people that in fact had already done jobs like that had lost management roles as we simplified the structure. But every time I was trying to compete for one of these as a first-time leader, I was competing against people that had tons of, you know, more knowledge and expertise. So I can remember one where, you know, the good news, bad news was, the good news was I was in the final three, the bad news was I didn't get the job. And so ultimately for me, part of that moving to a different GE business was, it was a way to get an opportunity that I didn't think I was going to get in my current business. And you know, it was one where I had to make a choice in terms of moving. You know, for me, and again, Cincinnati, Louisville, it's not huge, but you know, it's a different state and it's a different city. And my family's, they all live in Cincinnati. I'm the only one that's not there. Brothers and sisters, Cincinnati is a place where you live, you grow up there, you tend to marry people from there, and you stay put. And so the fact that I was moving, even, you know, and again, Louisville's, I don't know, an hour and 45 minutes away. It wasn't incredibly far, but you know, it was a big deal to my family. Now what worked for me, I think, just to share with you, is, you know, that was a manageable change because I was a single parent. My daughter was 3 at the time. So for me, part of my decision was, I'm moving away from that family kind of support, and can I manage that as I move into a new city, take a new job? Can I still do all those things I need to do? And so the transition was, while family wasn't there every day, they were only about an hour and a half, depending how fast I drove up the road. So it was easy to get back. You know, for me, in terms of a first move, it was the perfect transition. So then, you know, 5 years later, when a chance came to come to Atlanta, it was easy because I'd already kind of managed that. But I think it's a good point. And again, you know, you've got to understand what works for you, and again, your family and your personal values. But I'm sure over time I would have had other opportunities had I stayed at Aircraft. I mean, they would have come at some point in time. But you know, at that point, for me, I was ready for something more and different, and it wasn't there. And that was what really spurred me to, you know, choose to make some bigger changes in my life. And as it turned out, you know, for me, it worked out. And I think for my daughter, you know, she's a flexible kid. She learned early on. I was working. She was in daycare, right? So she learned about being with new people. It wasn't like just, you know, she was never that kid like hanging on your leg, right? Because she had to, you know, she was in a situation where she was oftentimes meeting new people. And so not only did it work for me, but as it turned out, it worked for her. And it you know, it helped shape her into the kind of who she is today in terms of likes to meet new people, and she's open and flexible in new situations. So it's a good point, though. Yep. Oops, sorry.
I heard you say something earlier about like a stress test that y'all model
Mm-hmm.
that you use to kind of assess, you know, where you all were as far as how you were affected by the economy and stuff. Like, what were some other strategies that GE used that they implemented?
In terms of managing through the risk environment?
Yeah.
You know, we did a lot. I would say, for one thing, so we talk about originating. By what that we mean is if you're applying for a credit card, right? The decisions that we make on who are we going to give that credit card to, and frankly, what kind of credit line. So are we going to give you $1,000 of credit? Are we going to give you $2,500? And at what rate? So what are the terms? So while I would say GE Capital in particular has a very strong culture around risk and really wanting to manage risk effectively, in this environment, we tightened up those criteria, right? So you hear about your credit score, right? So your FICO score. You know, in the past, we might have originated, and I'll make the numbers up because I don't know exactly, but you know, might have originated anywhere from 600 and up. You know, in this environment, we started raising that. So maybe it was 650 as things got tougher for certain industries, certain retailers, depending on the consumers. So we really raised the kind of credit score of whom we would originate credit for. We gave smaller lines, and for people that maybe already had a credit card, we might have reduced their line. So I might have had a Banana Republic credit card with a $2,000 line. Depending on, you know, if I was a healthy consumer, was always paying, they might have left it go. But if I was getting delinquent, so you're late on payment, that we would have shrank that line, right? So that was one of them. And then I think, well, also what we did was a function of our business is customer service, so really managing the interactions with our consumers, but then collections. So if you get delinquent to where we're concerned about you're not going to pay, then we've got an organization, you know, that will call people. But you know, in this environment, it was what kind of different strategies could we use? Because I might be calling you, and meanwhile you got called from your Visa card, and you know, if you're a consumer who's in a stress situation, you know, we really needed to enact different strategies to really help the consumers themselves. Because if, you know, our philosophy was if we didn't help them through a tough time, we weren't going to get our money either way, right? So the question was, what could you do differently? So those are a variety of some of the things that we did to manage through, you know, a very different risk environment.
Now I was looking for something more.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
But I was looking for something more internally as far as how your employees were affected.
Oh, sorry. Oh gosh. Well, you know, what I would say is it was tough for two things. One, you know, the overall cycle was changing. So, you know, while the business wasn't as profitable, we were watching our cost position. That oftentimes means you're spending less, and that translates to employees. But in addition to that, we also went through a process where the GE company overall was kind of paring down the business portfolio. And so for a while, they had a strategy that said, we think we actually want to sell this business. So not only was the economy changing, but our business was for sale. And so we had two really stressful things going on at the same time. Lee's nodding, because, you know, we all lived through it. It was really hard. Partly, I would say, because, you know, the impact of that, and I say change, because clearly we didn't sell the business, right? Changed our minds, and it's a big part of the strategy, and it's a very healthy business today. But what you went through for everybody was really an individual thing. If you were somebody that was part of the business being sold, you felt betrayed by the company, you felt like you were on your own, you didn't know what this was going to do in terms of your benefits, and frankly, whoever bought the company, were they going to keep you or not? You know, they had a lot of uncertainty. For those of us, because I happened to be on the side that was going to stay with GE, our job was to then go to divest this thing, and we're like, we don't want to, first of all, because those are our buddies right over there, but we love this business, right? And what happens when we get done divesting? Because when we're done with that, they don't need us either, right? So imagine that on top of, you know, the economy is tough, and we're doing layoffs. So, you know, I think in terms of, you know, managing the risk, it was really trying to focus just on the employees. You know, we upped the communication. Really tried to open up for more Q&A. So, you know, what questions do you have? And frankly, even if I didn't have anything new to share with people, we still would have these communication meetings, even if I was still repeating the information I had last time, because people just wanted to know what was going on. You know, to the extent that they didn't understand or they didn't know, it was more uncertainty. And what we were trying to do as a leadership team was not lose too many people in this time, because, you know, we need great people in the business. And again, as it turns out, we chose not to sell the business anyway, and so thank goodness we didn't lose too many. Frankly, I think if the economic cycle hadn't been so tough, and, you know, if the economy was better and people could have landed other jobs, we probably would have lost more during that time. But, you know, it's a bad thing that the economy was so tough, but it probably helped GE that we hung on to more people because of that. Okay, yeah.
I've been listening to you very carefully, and so far, and you've encouraged me to, like, you know, take a different outlook at my career and where I want to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to ask you if was there ever a time that you like there wasn't the desire to do your job wasn't as strong as others? Like if I can use myself as an example. All my life I've wanted to be a pilot, and aviation has always been my thing. But because of circumstances, I'm doing IT. And
okay.
Because of that.
But it's not your passion, right?
IT It's not my passion, so I constantly struggle with this, like, why am I doing IT?
Right.
My heart is with planes.
Right.
I just wanted to find out, was there ever a situation like that
Sure.
for you? And if so, like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
I'm trying to deal with it. Like, sometimes it's really hard.
Sure.
And stuff like that.
So I would say, I mean, the answer to the question is, have I ever had times like that? Sure I have. You know, my guess is everybody has. Again, and the struggle or how they feel about it might be different. Mine's a little different. It wasn't so much of a, gee, I've been in IT for 15 years and I don't like this anymore. I want to do something else. For me, it was just more, you know, something about a job situation that was tough. And, you know, I would say, you know, in most cases, I've enjoyed the challenges, but sometimes you get job challenges or situations that they're not really energizing. You know, the reality was when we were trying to sell a part of the business and we were laying people off, it was horrible. It was really, really hard. It was probably the hardest time ever in my career. And, you know, yeah, you're right. When the alarm went off in the morning, did I pop out of bed? And, you know, no, it was tough. And, you know, I was laying people off that I'd hired, you know, a team of people that I'd built that I really cared about. You know, I was having to let them know their jobs were gone. And, you know, and it wasn't just the letting them know, it was the, oh my gosh, worried about their families and where they're going to find something. And then, you know, on top of that, I had some challenges going on at home. My mom was ill. And so, you know, work was at its lowest point ever. And turns out on the personal side, things were tough. It was hard. You know, I think, you know, what I did to just kind of get through that. And so it's different than your situation a little bit. But, you know, I knew that at some point things were going to get better. I just didn't know when. But I also knew that a bunch of it wasn't entirely in my control. You know, what was happening on the family side, I just kind of had to deal with. It just made the work stuff harder. But, you know, frankly, I got kind of practical. While I hated the fact that we were laying people off and it was a really tough environment, it also made me incredibly grateful for the job I had. Because, you know, a lot of people were losing jobs. And while I didn't like it necessarily, and what I was having to do as a leader in that situation, I was really grateful I did have the job that I had. And I forced myself into another perspective, said, well, you maybe don't love it, but, you know, be glad you have what you have. And, you know, things change. Over time, it got better. You know, you work through the tough cycles, but, you know, just kind of hanging in there and doing the best you can despite everything. You know, the other thing I would share with you, you know, in that time, and again, it was tough for everybody in the business. And while I was feeling pretty crummy about things, I had to be really careful because if I was showing that on my face, the organization was reading that. And there was one time where I had a tough day. We'd gotten some really bad news about my mom. And it was clear on my face, but people didn't know because I hadn't yet shared. I was still digesting the news myself. But people could see. But their guess in terms of what it was that it was really bad work news. When in fact that wasn't it at all. And when I realized that people were kind of reading my face, I chose to share a little bit so people would know that, hey, because I tend to be upbeat, you know, happy, optimistic person. But, you know, when they didn't see that, it really scared people. And so I chose to share a little bit more about what was going on personally so that people wouldn't interpret it otherwise. But, you know, people really were reading me to try to assess the situation. So, you know, it was important to me as a leader to bring more to it than maybe I really wanted to, but I needed to because the organization was really important to me. So,
Yep.
What part does your department, if any, plays with the GE's Green Initiative?
The Women Initiative, did you say? Green. Oh, I'm sorry. So we don't do a lot with that. We actually, a few years ago, launched a credit card where you could get kind of green certificates, you know, almost think of like a points program. Frankly, it didn't take off all that much. I would say where we've got any alignment with green, it's really encouraging our consumers to do e-statements. So rather than, you know, printing on paper and frankly, it's not the mailing, although there's cost to it, but, you know, encouraging the e-statements, you know, the e-bill, e-pay, so that, you know, we can take some paper out of the process. That's probably the closest that we get to it. Certainly GE is huge in that, right? In our appliances business and lighting, you know, turbine businesses. So a lot of them have a lot, but for us, it's mostly can we avoid using paper? So, yep.
This is going to be our
Last one? Okay.
You shared with us that you were single mom and you were able to advance in but I'm sure you work with women who are also married.
Yep.
And I know in rural areas, you're taught pretty much to follow your husband and not necessarily your husband to follow you.
Right.
Which I think may have a lot to do with why women aren't able to move.
Right.
So I wanted to find out with women who are married and wanting to take advantage of opportunities that require moving, how do they handle that? Do they pretty much leave their husbands behind if they want to go?
Come on, get on the program or you're out, right? I think you see a mix. And again, it goes back to, you as a person, frankly, you as a couple, and what's important to you as a family. But, I have certainly seen, and frankly, we oftentimes have dual career, people at GE couples, right, where they're both working for GE. And sometimes what you'll see is they do an arrangement. Okay, this move's yours, but next time it's mine, right? And from a GE perspective, we try to accommodate, because if they're both really great talent, we want them both. And so we want them both with GE, and we want things working between them so we can continue to, have them. I would say, I think a lot of times with women, because while we did talk about moving, depending on where you are, right? In Connecticut, where I am now, there are a lot of GE opportunities. Had I been there earlier in my career, I might have been able to stay put and done less moving, right? But I have seen some where, the women choose to, I don't want to say prioritize family over, but they still work, but they don't prioritize the career progression as much, right? That the home has more, or maybe the husband is the main breadwinner. But then, I've got a lot of examples where you see the opposite. When the woman's career is growing, I can think of a couple big senior women at GE where, the husband's careers are smaller, and that's the choices that they've made. I would actually say, I think there's a lot more, and again, I think the South might be different, right? So areas are going to be different, but in the GE world, you do see quite a mix. Because I would say, if you rolled back the clock, 15, 20 years ago, if you saw a big woman leader, she was oftentimes either never married, right? So single woman or on her own. Versus now, I think if you went across GE at the cross-section of women leaders, most of them have families and, are making their own choices in terms of how to manage it. So I think it's changed quite a bit. Right.
We just want to thank you so much. Please
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
being here.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. So good to talk to you, and have a great rest of the day.